Digha Nikāya, Sutta number 3, Ambattha Sutta, Discourse to Ambattha the proud. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was touring Kosala with a large number of bhikkhus, some 500, and he came to a Kosalan Brahmin village called Icchānankala, and he stayed in the dense jungle of Icchānankala. At that time, the Brahmin Pukkarasati was living at Ukkattha, a populous place, full of grass, timber, water, and corn, which had been given to him by King Pasenadi of Kosala as a royal gift and with royal powers. It was at this time that Pukkarasati heard how the recluse Gotama, the son of the Sakyans, who went forth from a Sakyan clan, had been wandering in the country of the Kosalans with a large sangha of bhikkhus. Now a good report of Master Gotama had been spread to this effect. The Blessed One is accomplished, fully awakened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, with its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. Now, it is indeed good to see such arahants. Now at that time Pukkarasati had a pupil, the youth Ambattha, who was a student of the Vedas, who knew the mantras, perfected in the 3 Vedas, a skilled expounder of the rules and rituals, the lore of sounds and meanings, and fifthly, oral tradition, complete in philosophy and in the marks of a great man, admitted and accepted by his teacher in the 3 Vedas with the words, "What I know, you know. What you know, I know." And Pukkarasati said to Ambattha, "Ambattha, my son, the recluse Gotama, the son of the Sakyans, who went forth from a Sakyan clan, has been wandering in the country of the Kosalans with a large sangha of bhikkhus. Now a good report of Master Gotama has been spread to this effect. The Blessed One is accomplished, fully awakened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, with its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. Now it is good to see such arahants. Now, Ambattha, I want you to go and see the recluse Gotama and find out whether this report is correct or not, and whether the Venerable Gotama is as they say or not. In that way we shall put the Venerable Gotama to the test." "Sir, how shall I find out whether the report is true or whether the Venerable Gotama is as they say or not?" "According to the tradition of our mantras, Ambattha, the great man who is possessed of the 32 marks of a great man has only 2 courses open to him. If he lives the household life, he will become a ruler, a wheel-turning righteous monarch of the law, conqueror of the 4 quarters, who has established the security of his realm and is possessed of the 7 treasures. These are the wheel treasure, the elephant treasure, the horse treasure, the jewel treasure, the woman treasure, the householder treasure, and as seventh, the counselor treasure. He has more than 1,000 sons who are heroes, of heroic stature, conquerors of the hostile army. He dwells, having conquered this sea-girt land without stick or sword, but by the Dhamma. But if he goes forth from the household life into homelessness, then he will become an arahant, a fully awakened Buddha, one who draws back the veil from the world. And, Ambattha, I am the passer-on of the mantras, while you are the receiver. Very good, sir, said Ambattha at Pukkarasati's words, and he got up, passed by Pukkarasati with his right side, got into his chariot drawn by a mare, and, accompanied by a number of young men, headed for the dense jungle of Icchānankala. He drove as far as the carriage would go, then came off and continued on foot. At that time a number of bhikkhus were walking up and down in the open air. Ambattha approached them and said, "Where is the Venerable Gautama to be found just now? We have come to see the Venerable Gautama." The monks thought, "This is Ambattha, a youth of good family and a pupil of the distinguished Brahmin Pukkarasati. The Lord would not mind having a conversation with such a young man." And they said to Ambattha, "This is his dwelling, with the door closed. Go quietly up to it, go on to the veranda without haste, cough, and knock on the bolt. The Lord will open the door to you." Ambattha went up to the dwelling and on to the veranda, coughed, and knocked. The Lord opened the door, and Ambattha went in. The young men entered, exchanged courtesies with the Lord, and sat down to one side. But Ambattha walked up and down while the Lord sat there, uttered some vague words of politeness, and then stood so speaking before the seated Lord. And the Lord said to Ambattha, "Well now, Ambattha, would you behave like this if you were talking to venerable and learned Brahmins, teachers of teachers, as you do with me, walking and standing while I am sitting and uttering vague words of politeness?" "No, Venerable Gautama. A Brahmin should walk with a walking Brahmin, stand with a standing Brahmin, sit with a sitting Brahmin, and lie down with a Brahmin who is lying down. But as for those shaven little ascetics, menials, black scorings from Brahma's foot, with them it is fitting to speak just as I do with the Venerable Gautama." "But, Ambattha, you came here seeking something. Whatever it was you came for, you should listen attentively to hear about it." "Ambattha, you have not perfected your training. Your conceit of being trained is due to nothing but inexperience." Here Ambattha became angry and displeased at being called untrained, as he turned towards the Lord with curses and insults, thinking, "The recluse Gautama bears me ill will." And he said, "Venerable Gautama, the Sakyans are fierce, rough-spoken, touchy, and violent. Being of menial origin, being menials, they do not honor, respect, esteem, revere, or pay homage to Brahmins. With regard to this, it is not proper that they do not pay homage to Brahmins." This was the first time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. "But, Ambattha, what have the Sakyans done to you?" "Venerable Gautama, once I went to Kapilavatthu on some business for my teacher, the Brahmin Pukkarasati, and I came to the Sakyans' meeting hall. And at that time a great number of Sakyans were sitting on high seats in their meeting hall, poking each other with their fingers, laughing and playing about together. And it seemed to me that they were just making fun of me, and no one offered me a seat. With regard to this, it is not proper that they do not pay homage to the Brahmins. This was the second time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. But, Ambattha, even the quail, that little bird, can talk as she likes on her own nest. Kapilavatthu is the Sakyans' home, Ambattha. They do not deserve censure for such a trifle. Venerable Gautama, there are 4 castes, the Khattiyas, the Brahmins, the merchants, and the artisans. And of these 4 castes, 3, the Khattiyas, the merchants, and the artisans, are entirely subservient to the Brahmins. With regard to this, it is not proper that they should not pay homage to the Brahmins. This was the 3rd time Ambattha accused the Sakyans of being menials. Then the Lord thought, "This young man goes too far in abusing the Sakyans. Suppose I were to ask after his clan name." So he said, "Ambattha, what is your clan name?" "I am a Kanhayan, Venerable Gautama." Ambattha, in former days, according to those who remember the ancestral lineage, the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. For the Sakyans regard King Okkāka as their ancestor. At one time, King Okkāka, to whom his queen was dear and beloved, wishing to transfer the kingdom to her son, banished his elder brothers from the kingdom, Okkamukha, Karandu, Hathiniya, and Sinipura, and these, being banished, made their home on the flank of the Himalayas, beside a lotus pond, where there was a big grove of teak trees. And for fear of contaminating the stock, they cohabitated with their own sisters. Then King Okkāka asked his ministers and counselors, "Where are the princes living now?" And they told him. At this, King Okkāka exclaimed, "They are strong as teak trees, these princes. They are real Sakyans." And that is how the Sakyans got their well-known name, after the teak tree, Saka. And the king was the ancestor of the Sakyans. Now, King Okkāka had a slave girl called Disa, who gave birth to a black child. The black child, when it was born, exclaimed, "Wash me, mother! Bathe me, mother! Deliver me from this dirt, and I will bring you profit." Because, Ambattha, just as people today use the term hobgoblin, pisacha, as a term of abuse, so in those days they used the term kanha, or black. And they said, "As soon as he was born, he spoke. He is born a kanha, or hobgoblin." That is how, in former days, the Sakyans were the masters, and you are descended from a slave girl of the Sakyans. On hearing this, the young men said, "Venerable Gautama, do not humiliate Ambattha too much with talk of his being descended from a slave girl. Ambattha is well born, of a good family. He is very learned, he is well spoken, a scholar, well able to hold his own in this discussion with the Venerable Gautama." Then the Lord said to the young men, "If you consider that Ambattha is ill-born, not of a good family, unlearned, ill-spoken, no scholar, unable to hold his own in this discussion with the recluse Gautama, then let Ambattha be silent, and you conduct this discussion with me. But if you think he is well born, of a good family, being very learned, or well spoken, a scholar, able to hold his own, then you be quiet and let him discuss with me. Ambattha is well born, Venerable Gautama, of a good family. He is very learned. He is well spoken, a scholar, well able to hold his own in this discussion with the Venerable Gautama. We will be silent. He shall continue. Then the Lord said to Ambattha, Ambattha, I have a fundamental question for you, which you will not like to answer. If you don't answer or evade the issue, if you keep silent or go away, your head will split into 7 pieces. What do you think, Ambattha? Have you heard from old and venerable Brahmins, teachers of teachers, where the Kanhayans came from? Or who was their ancestor? At this, Ambattha remained silent. The Lord asked him a second time. Again Ambattha remained silent. And the Lord said, Answer me now, Ambattha. This is not a time for keeping silent. Whoever, Ambattha, does not answer a fundamental question put forth to him by a Tathagata by the third asking, has his head split into 7 pieces. And at that moment, Vajrapani, the yathā, holding a huge iron club, flaming ablaze and glowing, up in the sky, just above Ambattha, appeared, as was thinking, if this young Ambattha does not answer a proper question put to him by the Blessed Lord, by the third time of asking, I will split his head into 7 pieces. The Lord saw Vajrapani, and so did Ambattha. And at this sight, Ambattha became terrified and unnerved. His hair stood on end, and he sought protection, shelter, and safety from the Lord. Crouching down close to the Lord, he said, What did the Venerable Gautama say? May the Venerable Gautama repeat what he said. What do you think, Ambattha? Have you heard who was the ancestor of the Kanhayans? Yes, I have heard it just as the Venerable Gautama said. That is, where the Kanhayans came from. He was their ancestor. Hearing this, the young men made a loud noise and clamor. So Ambattha is ill-born, not of a good family, born of a slave girl of the Sakyans, and the Sakyans are Ambattha's masters. We disparaged the recluse Gautama, thinking he was not speaking the truth. Then the Lord thought, It is too much, the way these young men humiliate Ambattha for being the son of a slave girl. I must get him out of this. So he said to the young men, Do not disparage Ambattha too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kanha was a mighty sage. He went to the south country, learnt the mantras of the Brahmins there, and then went to King Okkaka and asked for his daughter Maddarupi. And King Okkaka, furiously angry, exclaimed, So this fellow, the son of a slave girl, wants my daughter? And put an arrow to his bow. But he was unable either to shoot the arrow or to withdraw it. Then the ministers and counselors came to the sage Kanha and said, Spare the king, reverend sir, spare the king. The king will be safe, but if he lets go of the arrow downwards, the earth will quake as far as his kingdom extends. Revered sir, spare the king, spare the land. The king and the land will be safe, but if he lets go of the arrow upwards, as far as his realm extends, the god will not let it rain for 7 years. Revered sir, spare the king and the land, and may the gods let it rain. The king and the land will be safe, and the gods will let it rain. But if the king points the arrow at the crown prince, the prince will be completely safe. Then the ministers exclaimed, "Let King Okkāka point the arrow at the crown prince. The prince will be perfectly safe." The king did so, and the prince was unharmed. Then King Okkāka, terrified and fearful of divine punishment, gave away his daughter Maddarupi. So, young men, do not disparage Ambattha too much for being the son of a slave girl. That Kanha was a mighty sage. Then the Lord said, "Ambattha, what do you think? Suppose a Khattiya youth were to marry a Brahmin girl, and there was a son born out of that marriage. Would that son of a Khattiya youth and a Brahmin girl receive a seat and water from the Brahmins?" "He would, venerable sir." "Would they allow him to eat at funeral rites, at rice offerings, at sacrifices, or as a guest?" "They would, venerable sir." "Would they teach him mantras or not?" "They would, venerable sir." "Would they keep their women covered or uncovered?" "Uncovered, venerable sir." "But would the Khattiyas sprinkle him with the Khattiya consecration?" "No, venerable sir." "Why not?" "Because, venerable sir, he is not well born on his mother's side." "What do you think, Ambattha? Suppose a Brahmin youth were to marry a Khattiya girl, and there was a son born from the marriage. Would that son of a Khattiya youth and a Brahmin girl receive a seat and water from the Brahmins?" "He would, venerable sir." "Would they allow him to eat at funeral rites, at rice offerings, at sacrifices, or as a guest?" "They would, venerable sir." "Would they teach him mantras or not?" "They would, venerable sir." "Would they keep their women covered or uncovered?" "Uncovered, venerable sir." "But would the Khattiyas sprinkle him with the Khattiya consecration?" "No, venerable sir." "Why not?" "Because, venerable sir, he is not well born on his father's side." So, Ambattha, the Khattiyas, through a man taking a woman or a woman taking a man, are senior to the Brahmins. What do you think, Ambattha? Take the case of a Brahmin who, for some reason, has had his head shaved by the Brahmins, has been punished with a bag of ashes and banished from the country or the city. Would he receive a seat and water from the Brahmins? No, venerable sir. Would they allow him to eat at funeral rites, at rice offerings, at sacrifices, or as a guest? No, venerable sir. Would they teach him mantras or not? They would not, venerable sir. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? Covered, venerable sir. What do you think, Ambattha? Take the case of a Khattiya who, for some reason, has had his head shaved by the Khattiyas, has been punished with a bag of ashes and banished from the country or the city. Would he receive a seat and water from the Brahmins? He would, venerable sir. Would he be allowed to eat at funeral rites, at rice offerings, at sacrifices, or as a guest? He would, venerable sir. Would he be taught mantras or not? He would, venerable sir. Would they keep their women covered or uncovered? Uncovered, venerable sir. But that Khattiya has so far reached the extreme of humiliation that he has had his head shaved by the Khattiyas, has been punished with a bag of ashes and banished from the country or the city. So even if a Khattiya has suffered extreme humiliation, he is superior and the Brahmins inferior. Ambattha, this verse was pronounced by Brahma Sanankumara. The Kshatriyas best among those who value clan. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men. This verse was rightly sung, not wrongly, rightly spoken, not wrongly, connected with gain, not unconnected. And Ambattha, I too say this, the Kshatriyas best among those who value clan. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men. But, Venerable Sir, what is this conduct? What is this knowledge? Ambattha, it is not from the standpoint of the attainment of unexcelled knowledge and conduct that reputation based on birth and clan is declared, nor on the conceit which says, "You are worthy of me, you are not worthy of me." For wherever there is a giving, a taking, or a giving and taking in marriage, there is always this talk and this conceit. You are worthy of me, you are not worthy of me. But those who are enslaved by such things are far from the attainment of the unexcelled knowledge and conduct, which is attained by abandoning all such things. But, Venerable Sir, what is this conduct? What is this knowledge? Ambattha, a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished, fully awakened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime knower of worlds, unsurpassed trainer of humans to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and exalted. Having realized by his own direct knowledge this world with its gods, its maras, and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, its rulers and people, he makes it known to others. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Possessing meaning and phrasing, he reveals the holy life that is fully complete and pure. A householder or a householder's son, or one born into some other family, hears the Dhamma. Having heard the Dhamma, he gains faith in the Tathagata. Endowed with such faith, he reflects, the household life is crowded, a path of dust. Going forth is like the open air. It is not easy for one dwelling at home to lead the perfectly complete, perfectly pure, holy life, bright as a polished shell. Let me then shave off my hair and beard, put on saffron robes, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. After some time, he abandons his accumulation of wealth, be it large or small. He abandons his circle of relatives, be it large or small. He shaves off his hair and beard, puts on saffron robes, and goes forth from home life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he lives restrained by the restraint of the Patimokkha, possessed of proper behavior and resort. Having taken up the rules of training, he trains himself in them, seeing danger in the slightest faults. He comes to be endowed with wholesome bodily and verbal action. His lifestyle is purified, and he is possessed of moral discipline. He guards the doors of his sense faculties, is endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension, and is content. And how, Ambattha, is the bhikkhu possessed of moral discipline? Herein, Ambattha, having abandoned the destruction of life, the bhikkhu abstains from the destruction of life. He has laid down the rod and weapon, and dwells conscientious, full of kindness, sympathetic for the welfare of all living beings. This pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned taking what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given. Accepting and expecting only what is given, he lives in honesty with a pure mind. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned non-celibacy, he leads the holy life of celibacy. He dwells aloof and abstains from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned false speech, he abstains from falsehood. He speaks only the truth. He lives devoted to truth. Trustworthy and reliable. He does not deceive anyone in the world. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned slander, he abstains from slander. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide others from the people here. Nor does he repeat here what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from the people there. Thus he is a reconciler of those who are divided and a promoter of friendships. Rejoicing, delighting, and exulting in concord, he speaks only words that are conducive to concord. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks only such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, endearing, going to the heart, polite, amiable, and agreeable to the many folk. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Having abandoned idle chatter, he abstains from idle chatter. He speaks at the right time, speaks what is factual and beneficial, speaks on the Dhamma and the discipline. His words are worth treasuring. They are timely, backed by reason, measured and connected with the good. This too pertains to his moral discipline. He abstains from damaging seed and plant life. He eats only in one part of the day, refraining from food at night and from eating at improper times. He abstains from dancing, singing, instrumental music, and from witnessing unsuitable shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, embellishing himself with scents, and beautifying himself with unguents. He abstains from high and luxurious beds and seats. He abstains from accepting gold and silver. He abstains from accepting uncooked grain, raw meat, women and girls, male and female slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and swine, elephants, cattle, horses and mares. He abstains from accepting fields and lands. He abstains from running messages and errands. He abstains from buying and selling. He abstains from dealing with false weights, false metals, and false measures. He abstains from the crooked ways of bribery, deception, and fraud. He abstains from mutilating, executing, imprisoning, robbery, plunder, and violence. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, continually cause damage to seed and plant life, to plants propagated from roots, stems, joints, buds, and seeds, he abstains from damaging seed and plant life. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of stored-up goods, such as stored-up food, drinks, garments, vehicles, bedding, scents, and comestibles, he abstains from the use of stored-up goods. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, attend unsuitable shows, such as shows featuring dancing, singing, or instrumental music, theatrical performances, narrations of legends, music played by hand-clapping, cymbals and drums, picture houses, acrobatic performances, combats of elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, goats, rams, roosters and quails, stick fights, boxing and wrestling, sham fights, roll calls, battle arrays and regimental reviews, He abstains from attending such unsuitable shows. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, indulge in the following games and recreations: Attapada, a game played on an 8-row chessboard; Dasapada, a game played on a 10-row chessboard; Akasa, played by imagining a board in the air; Pariharapata, hopscotch; Santika, spillikins, assembling the pieces in a pile, removing and returning them without disturbing the pile; Kalika, dice games; Gatika, hitting a short stick with a long stick; Salakahatha, a game played by dipping the hand in paint or dye, striking the ground or a wall, and requiring the participants to show the figure of an elephant, a horse, etc. Akka, ball games; Pangachira, blowing through toy pipes made of leaves; Vankaka, plowing with miniature plows; Mokkachika, turning somersaults; Chingulika, playing with paper windmills; Patalaka, playing with toy measures; Rattaka, playing with toy chariots; Dhanuka, playing with toy bows; Akarika, guessing at letters written in the air or on one's back; Manesika, guessing others' thoughts; Yathā, charades. He abstains from such games that are bases for negligence. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of high and luxurious beds and seats, such as spacious couches, thrones with animal figures carved on the supports, long-haired coverlets, multicolored patchwork coverlets, white woolen coverlets embroidered with flowers, quilts stuffed with cotton, woolen coverlets embroidered with animal figures, woolen coverlets with hair on both sides or on one side, bedspreads embroidered with gems, silk coverlets, dance hall carpets, elephant, horse, or chariot rugs, rugs of antelope skin, choice spreads made of kadali deer hides, spreads with red awnings overhead, couches with red cushions for head and feet. He abstains from the use of such high and luxurious beds and seats. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on food offered by the faithful, enjoy the use of such devices for embellishing and beautifying themselves as the following: rubbing scented powders into the body, massaging with oils, bathing in perfumed water, kneading the limbs, mirrors, ointments, garlands, scents, unguents, face powders, makeup, bracelets, headbands, decorated walking sticks, ornamented medicine tubes, rapiers, sunshades, embroidered sandals, turbans, diadems, yak-tail whisks, and long-fringed white robes. He abstains from the use of such devices for embellishment and beautification. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in frivolous chatter, such as talk about kings, thieves, and ministers of state, talk about armies, dangers, and wars, talk about food, drink, garments, and lodgings, talk about garlands and scents, talk about relations, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, and countries, talk about women and talk about heroes, street talk and talk by the well, talk about those departed in days gone by, rambling chit-chat, speculations about the world and about the sea, talk about gain and loss. He abstains from such frivolous chatter. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in wrangling argumentation, saying to one another, You don't understand this doctrine and discipline. It is I who understand this doctrine and discipline. How can you understand this doctrine and discipline? You're practicing the wrong way. I am practicing the right way. I'm being consistent. You're inconsistent. What should have been said first, you said last. What should have been said last, you said first. What you took so long to think out has been confuted. Your doctrine has been refuted. You're defeated. Go, try to save your doctrine, or disentangle yourself now, if you can. He abstains from such wrangling argumentation. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in running messages and errands for kings, ministers of state, Khattiyas, Brahmins, householders or youths, who command them, go here, go there, take this, bring that from there. He abstains from running such errands and messages. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, engage in scheming, talking, hinting, belittling others, and pursuing gain with gain, he abstains from such kinds of scheming and talking. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as prophesying long life, prosperity, etc., or the reverse, from the marks on a person's limbs, hands, feet, etc., divining by means of omens and signs, making auguries on the basis of thunderbolts and celestial portents, interpreting ominous dreams, telling fortunes from marks on the body, making auguries from the marks on cloth gnawed by mice, offering fire oblations, offering oblations from a ladle, offering oblations of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee and oil to the gods, offering oblations from the mouth, offering blood sacrifices to the gods, making predictions based on the fingertips, determining whether the site for a proposed house or garden is favorable or not, making predictions for officers of state, laying demons in a cemetery, laying ghosts, knowledge of charms to be pronounced by one living in an earthen house, snake charming, the poison craft, scorpion craft, rat craft, bird craft, crow craft, foretelling the number of years that a man has to live, reciting charms to give protection from arrows, reciting charms to understand the language of animals. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as interpreting the significance of the color, shape, and other features of the following items to determine whether they portend fortune or misfortune for their owners: gems, garments, staffs, swords, spears, arrows, bows, other weapons, women, men, boys, girls, slaves, slave women, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, fowl, quails, lizards, house gables, tortoises, and other animals. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by a wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as making predictions to the effect that the king will march forth, the king will return, our king will attack and the enemy king will retreat, our enemy king will attack and our king will retreat, Our king will triumph and the enemy king will be defeated. The enemy king will triumph and our king will be defeated. Thus there will be victory for one and defeat for the other. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as predicting, there will be an eclipse of the moon, an eclipse of the sun, an eclipse of a constellation. The sun and the moon will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of the sun and moon. The constellations will go on their proper courses. There will be an aberration of a constellation. There will be a fall of meteors. There will be a sky blaze. There will be an earthquake. There will be an earth roar. There will be a rising and setting, a darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. Such will be the result of the moon's eclipse, such the result of the sun's eclipse, and so on down to such will be the result of the rising and setting, darkening and brightening of the moon, sun, and constellations. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as predicting, there will be abundant rain, there will be a drought, there will be a good harvest, there will be a famine, there will be security, there will be danger, there will be sickness, there will be health, or they earn their living by accounting, computation, calculation, the composing of poetry, and speculations about the world. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as arranging auspicious dates for marriages, both those in which the bride is brought home and those in which she is sent out, arranging auspicious dates for betrothals and divorces, arranging auspicious dates for the accumulation or expenditure of money, reciting charms to make people lucky or unlucky, rejuvenating the fetuses of abortive women, reciting spells to bind a man's tongue, to paralyze his jaws, to make him lose control over his hands, or to bring on deafness, obtaining oracular answers to questions by means of a mirror, a girl, or a god, worshipping the sun, worshipping Mahabrahma, bringing forth flames from the mouth, invoking the goddess of luck. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Whereas some recluses and Brahmins, while living on the food offered by the faithful, earn their living by wrong means of lifestyle, by such debased arts as promising gifts to deities in return for favors, fulfilling such promises, demonology, reciting spells after entering an earthen house, inducing virility and impotence, preparing and consecrating sites for a house, giving ceremonial mouthwashes and ceremonial bathing, offering sacrificial fires, administering emetics, purgatives, expectorants, and phlegmagogues, administering medicines through the ear and through the nose, administering ointments and counter-ointments, practicing fine surgery on the eyes and ears, practicing general surgery on the body, practicing as a children's doctor. He abstains from such wrong means of lifestyle, from such debased arts. This too pertains to his moral discipline. Ambattha, the bhikkhu who is thus possessed of moral discipline, sees no danger anywhere in regard to his restraint by moral discipline. Just as a head-anointed noble warrior who has defeated his enemies sees no danger anywhere from his enemies, so the bhikkhu who is thus possessed of moral discipline sees no danger anywhere in regard to his restraint by moral discipline. Endowed with this noble aggregate of moral discipline, he experiences within himself a blameless happiness. In this way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu, is possessed of moral discipline. And how, Ambattha, does the bhikkhu guard the doors of his sense faculties? Herein, Ambattha, having seen a form with the eye, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the eye, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the eye. Having heard a sound with the ear, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the ear, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the ear, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the ear. Having smelled an odor with the nose, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the nose, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the nose, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the nose. Having tasted a flavor with the tongue, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its signs or features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the tongue, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the tongue, and he achieves restraint over the faculty of the tongue. Having touched a tangible object with the body, the bhikkhu does not grasp at the signs or its features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the body, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the body, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the body. Having cognized a mind object with the mind, the bhikkhu does not grasp at its sign or its features, since if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the mind, evil unwholesome states such as covetousness and grief might assail him. He practices restraint, guards the faculty of the mind, and achieves restraint over the faculty of the mind. Endowed with this noble restraint of the sense faculties, he experiences within himself an unblemished happiness. In this way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu guards the doors of the sense faculties. And how, Ambattha, is the bhikkhu endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension? Here, Ambattha, in going forward and returning, the bhikkhu acts with clear comprehension. In looking ahead and looking aside, he acts with clear comprehension. In bending and stretching his limbs, he acts with clear comprehension. In wearing his robes and cloak, and using his alms bowl, he acts with clear comprehension. In eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, he acts with clear comprehension. In defecating and urinating, he acts with clear comprehension. In going, standing, sitting, lying down, waking up, speaking, and remaining silent, he acts with clear comprehension. In this way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu, is endowed with mindfulness and clear comprehension. And how, Ambattha, is the bhikkhu content? Herein, Ambattha, a bhikkhu is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to sustain his belly. Wherever he goes, he sets out, taking only his requisites along with him. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burden. In the same way, a bhikkhu is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to sustain his belly. Wherever he goes, he sets out taking only his requisites along with him. In this way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu, is content. Endowed with this noble aggregate of moral discipline, this noble restraint over the sense faculties, this noble mindfulness and clear comprehension, and this noble contentment, he resorts to a secluded dwelling, a forest, the foot of a tree, a mountain, a glen, a hillside cave, a cremation ground, a jungle grove, the open air, a heap of straw. After returning from his alms round, following his meals, he sits down, crosses his legs, holds his body erect, and sets up mindfulness before him. Having abandoned covetousness for the world, he dwells with a mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Having abandoned ill will and hatred, he dwells with a benevolent mind, sympathetic for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Having abandoned dullness and drowsiness, he dwells perceiving light, mindful and clearly comprehending. He purifies his mind from dullness and drowsiness. Having abandoned restlessness and worry, he dwells at ease within himself. With a peaceful mind, he purifies his mind from restlessness and worry. Having abandoned doubt, he dwells as one who has passed beyond doubt. Unperplexed about wholesome states, he purifies his mind from doubt. Ambattha, suppose a man were to take a loan and apply it to his business, and his business were to succeed, so that he could pay back his old debts and would have enough money left over to maintain a wife, he would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Ambattha, suppose a man were to become sick, afflicted, gravely ill, so that he could not enjoy his food and his strength would decline. After some time he would recover from that illness and would enjoy his food and regain his bodily strength. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Ambattha, suppose a man were locked up in a prison. After some time he would be released from prison, safe and secure, with no loss of his possessions. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Ambattha, suppose a man were a slave, without independence, subservient to others, unable to go where he wants. After some time he would be released from slavery and gain his independence. He would no longer be subservient to others, but a free man able to go where he wants. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. Again, Ambattha, suppose a man with wealth and possessions were traveling along a desert road, where food was scarce and dangers were many. After some time he would cross over the desert and arrive safely at a village which is safe and free from danger. He would reflect on this, and as a result he would become glad and experience joy. In the same way, Ambattha, when a bhikkhu sees that these 5 hindrances are unabandoned within himself, he regards that as a debt, as a sickness, as confinement in prison, as slavery, as a desert road. But when he sees that these 5 hindrances have been abandoned within himself, he regards that as freedom from debt, as good health, as release from prison, as freedom from slavery, as a place of safety. When he sees that these 5 hindrances have been abandoned within himself, gladness arises. When he is gladdened, joy arises. When his mind is filled with joy, his body becomes tranquil. Tranquil in body, he experiences happiness. Being happy, his mind becomes collected. quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and pondering, and filled with joy and happiness born of seclusion. He drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with this joy and happiness born of seclusion, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. Ambattha, suppose a skilled bath attendant or his apprentice were to pour soap powder into a metal basin, sprinkle it with water, and knead it into a ball, so that the ball of soap powder be pervaded by moisture, encompassed by moisture, suffused with moisture inside and out, yet would not trickle. In the same way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with the joy and happiness born of seclusion, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. This, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. Further, Ambattha, with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, the bhikkhu enters upon and dwells in the second jhana, which is accompanied by internal confidence and unification of mind, is without thinking and pondering, and is filled with the joy and happiness born of collectedness of mind. He drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with this joy and happiness born of collectedness of mind, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. Ambattha, suppose there were a deep lake whose waters welled up from below. It would have no inlet for water from the east, west, north, or south, nor would it be refilled from time to time with showers of rain. Yet a current of cool water, welling up from within the lake, would drench, steep, saturate, and suffuse the whole lake, so that there would be no part of that entire lake which is not suffused with the cool water. In the same way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with the joy and happiness born of collectedness of mind, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this joy and happiness. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. Further, Ambattha, with the fading away of joy, the bhikkhu dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly comprehending, and he experiences happiness with the body. Thus he enters and dwells in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, he dwells happily with equanimity and mindfulness. He drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with this happiness, free from joy, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this happiness. Ambattha, suppose in a lotus pond there were blue, white, or red lotuses that have been born in the water, grow in the water, and never rise up above the water, but flourish immersed in the water. From their tips to their roots they would be drenched, steeped, saturated, and suffused with cool water, so that there would be no part of those lotuses not suffused with cool water. In the same way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses his body with the happiness, free from joy, so that there is no part of his entire body which is not suffused by this happiness. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. Further, Ambattha, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, the bhikkhu enters and dwells in the fourth jhana, which is neither pleasant nor painful, and contains mindfulness fully purified by equanimity. He sits suffusing his body with a pure bright mind, so that there is no part of his entire body not suffused by a pure, bright mind. Ambattha, suppose a man were to be sitting covered from the head down by a white cloth, so that there would be no part of his entire body not suffused by the white cloth. In the same way, Ambattha, the bhikkhu sits suffusing his body with a pure, bright mind, so that there is no part of his entire body not suffused by the pure, bright mind. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to knowledge and vision. He understands thus, "This is my body, having material form, composed of the four primary elements, originating from father and mother, built up out of rice and gruel, impermanent, subject to rubbing and pressing, to dissolution and dispersion. And this is my consciousness, supported by it and bound up with it." Ambattha, suppose there were a beautiful beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well-cut, clear, limpid, flawless, endowed with all excellent qualities, and through it there would run a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread. A man with keen sight, taking it in his hand, would reflect upon it thus: "This is a beautiful beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well-cut, clear, limpid, flawless, endowed with all excellent qualities, and running through it there is this blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread." In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it and inclines it to knowledge and vision, and understands thus: "This is my body, having material form, composed of the four primary elements, originating from father and mother, built up out of rice and gruel, impermanent, subject to rubbing and pressing, to dissolution and dispersion. And this is my consciousness, supported by it and bound up with it." This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to creating a mind-made body. From this body he creates another body having material form, mind-made, complete in all its parts, not lacking any faculties. Ambattha, suppose a man were to draw out a reed from its sheath. He would think, "This is the reed, this is the sheath." The reed is one thing, the sheath another, but the reed has been drawn out from the sheath. Or suppose a man were to draw a sword out from its scabbard. He would think, "This is the sword, this is the scabbard." The sword is one thing, the scabbard another, but the sword has been drawn out from the scabbard. Or suppose a man were to pull a snake out from its slough. He would think, "This is the snake, this is the slough." The snake is one thing, the slough another, but the snake has been pulled out from the slough. In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to creating a mind-made body. From this body he creates another body, having material form, mind-made, complete in all its parts, not lacking any features. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the modes of supernormal power. He exercises the various modes of supernormal power. Having been one, he becomes many, and having been many, he becomes one. He appears and vanishes. He goes unimpeded through walls, ramparts, and mountains as if through space. He dives in and out of the earth as if it were water. He walks on water without sinking as if it were earth. Sitting cross-legged, he travels through space like a winged bird. With his hand he touches and strokes the sun and the moon, so mighty and powerful. He exercises mastery over the body as far as the Brahma world. Ambattha, suppose a skilled potter or his apprentice were to make and fashion out of well-prepared clay whatever kind of vessel he might desire. Or suppose a skilled ivory worker or his apprentice were to make and fashion out of well-prepared ivory whatever kind of ivory work he might desire. Or suppose a skilled goldsmith or his apprentice were to make and fashion out of well-prepared gold whatever kind of gold work he might desire. In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the modes of supernormal power. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the divine ear element. With the divine ear element, which is purified and surpasses the human, he hears both kinds of sound, the divine and the human, those which are distant and those which are near. Ambattha, suppose a man traveling along a highway were to hear the sounds of kettle drums, tambours, horns, cymbals, and tom-toms, and would think, "This is the sound of kettle drums, this is the sound of tambours, this is the sound of horns, cymbals, and tom-toms." In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, the bhikkhu directs and inclines it to the divine ear element. With the divine ear element, which is purified and surpasses the human, he hears both kinds of sound, the divine and the human, those which are distant and those which are near. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the knowledge of encompassing the minds of others. He understands the minds of other beings and persons, having encompassed them with his own mind. He understands a mind with lust as a mind with lust, and a mind without lust as a mind without lust. He understands a mind with hatred as a mind with hatred, and a mind without hatred as a mind without hatred. He understands a mind with delusion as a mind with delusion, and a mind without delusion as a mind without delusion. He understands a contracted mind as a contracted mind, and a distracted mind as a distracted mind. He understands an exalted mind as an exalted mind, and an unexalted mind as an unexalted mind. He understands a surpassable mind as a surpassable mind, and an unsurpassable mind as an unsurpassable mind. He understands a collected mind as a collected mind, and an uncollected mind as an uncollected mind. He understands a liberated mind as a liberated mind, and an unliberated mind as an unliberated mind. Ambattha, suppose a young man or woman, fond of ornaments, examining his or her own facial reflection in a pure, bright mirror or in a bowl of clear water, would know if there were a mole, it has a mole, and if there were no mole, it has no mole. In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, the bhikkhu directs and inclines it to the knowledge of encompassing the minds of others. He understands the minds of other beings and persons, having encompassed them with his own mind. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the knowledge of recollecting past lives. He recollects his numerous past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, or 5 births, 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many eons of world contraction, many eons of world expansion, many eons of world contraction and expansion, recollecting, there I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my span of life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose there. There too I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my span of life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose here. Thus he recollects his numerous past lives in their modes and their details. Ambattha, suppose a man were to go from his own village to another village, then from that village to still another village, and then from that village he would return to his own village. He would think to himself, I went from my own village to that village. There I stood in such a way, sat in such a way, spoke in such a way, and remained silent in such a way. From that village I went to still another village. There too I stood in such a way, sat in such a way, spoke in such a way, and remained silent in such a way. From that village I returned to my own village. In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, the bhikkhu directs and inclines it to the knowledge of recollecting past lives, and he recollects his numerous past lives in their modes and their details. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship, more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. And he understands how beings fare according to their kamma. Thus, these beings who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech, and mind, who reviled the noble ones, held wrong views, and undertook actions governed by wrong views, with the breakup of the body after death, have reappeared in the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the lower realms, in hell. But these beings, who were endowed with good conduct of body, speech, and mind, who did not revile the noble ones, held right views, and undertook actions governed by right views, with the breakup of the body, after death, have reappeared in the good destinations in the heavenly world. Thus, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and he understands how beings fare in accordance with their kamma. Ambattha, suppose in a central square there were a building with an upper terrace, and a man with keen sight standing there were to see people entering a house, leaving it, walking along the streets, and sitting in the central square. He would think to himself, "Those people are entering the house, those are leaving it, those are walking along the streets, and those are sitting in the central square." In the same way, Ambattha, when his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, the bhikkhu directs and inclines it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, and he understands how beings fare according to their kamma. This too, Ambattha, is a visible fruit of recluseship more excellent and sublime than the previous ones. When his mind is thus collected, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs and inclines it to the knowledge of the destruction of the contaminants. He understands as it truly is, this is suffering. He understands as it truly is, this is the origin of suffering. He understands as it truly is, this is the cessation of suffering. He understands as it truly is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. He understands as it truly is, these are the contaminants. He understands as it truly is, this is the origin of the contaminants. He understands as it truly is, this is the cessation of the contaminants. He understands as it truly is, this is the way leading to the cessation of the contaminants. Knowing and seeing thus, his mind is liberated from the contaminant of sensual desire, from the contaminant of becoming, and from the contaminant of ignorance. When it is liberated, the knowledge arises, it is liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is nothing beyond this. But, Ambattha, in the pursuit of this unexcelled attainment of knowledge and conduct, there are 4 paths of failure. What are they? In the first place, a recluse or Brahmin who has not managed to gain this unexcelled attainment takes his carrying pole and plunges into the depths of the forest, thinking, "I will live on windfalls." But in this way he only becomes an attendant on one who has attained. This is the first path of failure. Again, a recluse or Brahmin, being unable to live on windfalls, takes a spade and basket, thinking, "I will live on tubers and roots." This is the second path of failure. Again, a recluse or Brahmin, being unable to live on tubers and roots, makes a fire hearth at the edge of a village or small town and sits tending the flame. This is the third path of failure. Again, a recluse or Brahmin, being unable to tend the flame, erects a house with 4 doors at the crossroads, thinking, "Whatever recluse or Brahmin arrives from the 4 quarters, I will honor to the best of my strength and ability." But in this way he only becomes an attendant on one who has attained to unexcelled knowledge and conduct. This is the 4th path of failure. What do you think, Ambattha? Do you and your teacher live in accordance with this unexcelled knowledge and conduct? No, Venerable Sir. Who are my teacher and I in comparison? We are far from it. Well then, Ambattha, could you and your teacher, being unable to gain this, go with your carrying poles into the depths of the forest, intending to live on windfalls? No, Venerable Sir. Well then, Ambattha, could you and your teacher, being unable to gain this, live on tubers and roots? No, Venerable Sir. Well then, Ambattha, could you and your teacher, being unable to gain this, sit tending the flame? No, indeed, Venerable Sir. Well then, Ambattha, could you and your teacher, being unable to gain this, erect a house with 4 doors at the crossroads, thinking, whatever ascetic or Brahmin arrives from the 4 quarters, we will honor to the best of our strength and ability? No, indeed, Venerable Sir. And so, Ambattha, not only are you and your teacher incapable of attaining this unexcelled knowledge and conduct, but even the 4 paths of failure are beyond you. And you and your teacher, the Brahmin Pokkarasati, utter these words. These shaven little recluses, menials, black scrapings from Brahma's foot, what converse can they have with Brahmins learned in the 3 Vedas? Even though you can't even manage the duties of one who has failed. See, Ambattha, how your teacher has let you down? Ambattha, the Brahmin Pokkarasati lives by the grace and favor of King Pasenadi of Kosala, and yet the king does not allow him to have audience face to face. When he confers with the king, it is through a curtain. Why should the king not grant audience face to face to one on whom he has bestowed a proper and blameless source of revenue? See how your teacher has let you down. What do you think, Ambattha? Suppose King Pasenadi was sitting on the neck of an elephant or on horseback, or was standing on the chariot mat, conferring with his ministers and princes about something. And suppose he were to step aside and some workman or workman's servant were to come along and stand in his place. And standing there he might say, "This is what King Pasenadi of Kosala says." Would he be speaking the king's words, as if he were the king's equal? No, indeed, Venerable Sir. Well then, Ambattha, it is just the same thing. Those who were, as you say, the first sages of the Brahmins, the makers and expounders of the mantras, whose ancient verses are chanted, pronounced, and collected by the Brahmins of today, Attaka, Vamaka, Vamadeva, Vissamita, Yamataggi, Angirasa, Bharadvaja, Vasitha, Kassapa, Bhagu, whose mantras are said to be passed on to you and your teacher, yet you do not thereby become a sage or one practiced in the way of a sage. Such a thing is not possible. What do you think, Ambattha? What have you heard said by Brahmins who are venerable, aged, the teachers of teachers? Those first sages, Attaka, Vamaka, Vamadeva, Vesamita, Yamataggi, Angirasa, Bharadvaja, Vasitha, Kassapa, Bhagu. Did they enjoy themselves, well bathed, perfumed, their hair and beards trimmed, adorned with garlands and wreaths, dressed in white cloths, indulging in the pleasures of the 5 senses and addicted to them, as you and your teacher do now? No, Venerable Sir. Or did they eat special fine rice with the black spots removed, with various soups and curries, as you and your teacher do now? No, Venerable Sir. Or did they amuse themselves with women dressed up in flounces and furbelows, as you and your teacher do now? No, Venerable Sir. Or did they ride around in chariots drawn by mares with braided tails, that they urged on with long gauze sticks? No, venerable sir. Or did they have themselves guarded in fortified towns with palisades and barricades, by men with long swords? No, venerable sir. So, Ambattha, neither you nor your teacher are a sage or one trained in the way of a sage. And now, as for your doubts and perplexities concerning me, we will clarify these by your asking me, and by my answering your questions. Then, descending from his lodging, the Lord started to walk up and down, and Ambattha did likewise. And as he walked along with the Lord, Ambattha looked out for the 32 marks of a great man on the Lord's body, and he could see all of them except for 2. He was in doubt and perplexity about 2 of these marks. He could not make up his mind or be certain about the male organ that is sheathed or the large tongue. And the Lord, being aware of his doubts, affected by his psychic power, that Ambattha could see his male organ that is sheathed and then sticking out his tongue, he reached out to lick both his ears and both nostrils, and then covered the whole circle of his forehead with his tongue. Then Ambattha thought, the recluse Gotama is equipped with all the 32 marks of a great man, complete and with none missing. Then he said to the Lord, Venerable Sir, may I go now? I have much business, much to do. Ambattha, do what you now think fit. So Ambattha got back into his chariot, drawn by mares, and departed. Meanwhile, the Brahmin Pokkarasati had gone outside and was sitting in his park with a large number of Brahmins, just waiting for Ambattha. Then Ambattha came to the park. He rode in the chariot as far as it would go, and then continued on foot to where Pokkarasati was, saluted him, and sat down to one side. Then Pokkarasati said, Well, my son, did you see the Venerable Gautama? I did, sir. And was the Venerable Gautama such as he is reported to be, and not otherwise? And is he of such nature, and not otherwise? Sir, he is as he is reported to be, and he is of such nature, and not otherwise. He is possessed of the 32 marks of a great man, all complete, with none missing. But was there any conversation between you and the recluse Gautama? There was, sir. And what was this conversation about? So Ambattha told Pokkarasati all that had passed between the Lord and himself. At this, Pokkarasati exclaimed, Well, you're a fine little scholar, a fine wise man, a fine expert in the 3 Vedas. Anyone going about his business like that ought, when he dies, at the break-up of the body, to go to the downfall, to the evil path, to ruin, to hell. You have heaped insults on the Venerable Gautama, as a result of which he has brought up more and more things against us. You are a fine little scholar, a fine wise man, a fine expert in the 3 Vedas. Anyone going about his business like that ought, when he dies, at the break-up of the body, to go to the downfall, to the evil path, to ruin, to hell. He was so angry and enraged that he kicked Ambattha over, and wanted to start out at once to see the Lord. But the Brahmin said, It is far too late, sir, to go to see the recluse Gautama today. The Venerable Pokkarasati should go to see him tomorrow. Then Pokkarasati, having had fine, hard, and soft food prepared in his own home, set out by the light of torches from Ukkatta for the jungle of Icchānankala. He went by chariot as far as possible, then continued on foot to where the Lord was. Having exchanged courtesies with the Lord, he sat down to one side and said, Venerable Gautama, did not our pupil Ambattha come to see you? He did, Brahmin. And was there any conversation between you? There was. And what was this conversation about? Then the Lord told Pokkarasati all that had passed between him and Ambattha. At this, Pokkarasati said to the Lord, Venerable Gautama, Ambattha is a young fool. May the Venerable Gautama pardon him. Brahmin, may Ambattha be happy. Then Pokkarasati looked out for the 32 marks of a great man on the Lord's body, and he could see all of them except for 2. The male organ that was sheathed, and the large tongue. But the Lord set his mind at rest about these. And Pokkarasati said to the Lord, May the Venerable Gautama accept a meal from me today, together with his order of monks. And the Lord consented by silence. Seeing his acceptance, Pokkarasati said to the Lord, It is time, Venerable Gautama. The meal is ready. And the Lord, having dressed in the early morning and taken his outer robe and bowl, went with his order of monks to Pokkarasati's residence, and sat down on the prepared seat. Then Pokkarasati personally served the Lord with choice hard and soft food, and the young men served the monks. And when the Lord had taken his hand from the bowl, Pokkarasati sat down to one side on a low stool. And as Pokkarasati sat down, the Lord delivered a graduated discourse on generosity, on morality, and on the heavens, showing the danger, degradation, and corruption of sense desires, and the benefits of renunciation. And when the Lord knew that Pokkarasati's mind was ready, pliable, free from the hindrances, joyful and calm, then he preached a sermon on Dhamma in brief, on suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. And just as a clean cloth from which all stains have been removed receives the dye perfectly, so in the Brahmin Pokkarasati, as he sat there arose the pure and spotless Dhamma I, and he knew, whatever things have an origin must come to cessation. And Pokkarasati, having seen, attained, experienced, and penetrated the Dhamma, having passed beyond doubt, transcended uncertainty, having gained perfect confidence in the teacher's doctrine without relying on others, said, Excellent Lord, excellent! It is as if someone were to set up what had been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who had gotten lost, or to bring an oil lamp into a dark space, so that those with eyes could see what was there. Just so the Blessed Lord has expounded the Dhamma in various ways. I go with my son, my wife, my ministers and counselors for refuge to the Venerable Gautama, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha. May the Venerable Gautama accept me as a lay follower who has taken refuge from this day forth, as long as life shall last. And whenever the Venerable Gautama visits other families or lay followers in Ukkatta, may he also visit the family of Pokkarasati. Whatever young men and maidens are there will revere the Venerable Gautama and rise before him, will give him a seat and water, and will be glad at heart. and that will be for their welfare and happiness for a long time. Well said, Brahmin. So